Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 24th. Well, despite everything that was moving along so cleanly, we had the beginnings of a DOC spread here as cyan started picking up. But we still have some steel short-term buyers pushing things to the point where at least we held the ABM, but we were expecting this retrace. The ES didn't have positive extreme, it just had the yellow, but on the NASDAQ we clearly saw it. We talked about it just yesterday. In fact, it was this right here that we were looking for that low to be taken out, and that's exactly what happened. We're getting a little continuation for it from the NASDAQ. We're actually at the long algo, ABM green right there, and currently holding up on it, but potentially there's room for additional softness within this general move, because we're below the negative 13.5. It's like I pointed out before, when we dip below that point, it's effectively coming from the top in the form of a DOC spread until the steel moves back above. You're going to get a little bit of softness. This is that secondary little bump curve here with the lower peak at matching highs. So this is where you had a little bit of divergence. The NASDAQ was showing a little more weakness than the S&P. Of course, we know there's an algo level that they're going to select that will be the one that gets supported off of. It's just going to be a matter of following it. Still keeping the euro on its upward trajectory. Oil's still not going anywhere. I mean, we just whizzed through these, and gold, of course, as expected, continuing its breakout, especially as the China issues heat up. You've got Turkey making a big move both in Libya. They're also making a move with Greece and the drilling of oil. Just keep it in the back of your mind that world tensions are going to create some of this volatility, which will be negative for general market, and irrespective of what the Fed does. So from an intraday standpoint, we started out making those highs, and it was always within this DOC spread, but it had been from a reset standpoint. So it wasn't until a little bit later before you get the full crossover trigger, even though you did dip below with the little yellow markings right there from the Power Mode 2. Shakeout wasn't horrible, but you could clearly see that you already had magenta below, yellow below magenta, and you had falling shakeout highs. And so as that escalated, perfect return to that 3261 algo. We ended up with a pretty decent setup to go to the upside, but again, steel cross below that cyan. Right at the same time, we ended up with a peak at the top. Even if you waited until after you saw more exacerbation of the green below red, there was just no question we were coming back down below it. And of course, then we fought back and forth along that 61 algo, but we knew that a break of that 61 under weak signaling, 44 was the next range. So that's a pretty decent move to expect when it did break down. And once it did, and that took place, right here, as you ended up with your cross back below, magenta cross above, and literally continued on that cascade. In fact, you got a secondary cross within the down move of the Azure, so it was like a double whammy. And then it was just a soft. Now, this is a good one, because even though you end up with what I think is a reasonable orange signal, I mean, we had the orange dip, all the things we're meeting. Unfortunately, what happens is just within a bar after the orange candle, you get the dip cross of the steel that corresponds with then the crossover of the magenta, with the Azure pointing down. And so that just meant that was a failed long. Nothing you can do about those are going to happen. The power of it is, though, is you're going to get a much bigger move to the downside by capturing it. So more than makes up for its turnaround aspect. And sure enough, that gave us softness throughout much of the time period until we ended up with a couple of Sigma events that took place as things solidified, and when they finally crossed over, took us back to the 100%, which wasn't big enough move to get to the 44, which meant, well, you got problems there. So we just cascaded back lower. And that's currently where we are, coming off this beautiful crossover with the orange dip. And right now we're watching that steel move and see if we get a rollover of the Azure with the magenta, just to signify that it's either ended or maybe we're just in a pause mode if we don't get that crossover. So that's the current state of things. looking good. The range is just beautiful. I mean, what more do you want? But it's not going to be all one directional. This is something we've talked about repeatedly, and it's important to reemphasize that this is going to be a choppy, volatile market, and you should be prepared to move with it. As always, though, I will put up anything relevant on the Skype chat. Trade well.